Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the February 7th meeting of the West Sacramento Planning Commission. We'll begin this evening with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'd like to ask Mayor Cabaldon to lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tonight's agenda is available on the counter, along with request to speak cards. A reminder to everyone that request to speak card should be completed and turned into the clerk prior to the completion of any staff presentation. For those speakers wishing to speak on items not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the commission, please write item A on your card. All speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and televised, so all speakers, in order to be recognized, must be called on by the chair and come forward to the microphone. Speaking in public may cause some individuals to be uncomfortable, so everyone is asked to be professional and respectful at all times. Tonight's agenda has a few different sections. We'll start with the general administration function, part 1, and I will hand it over to Mayor Christopher Cabaldon to swear in Planning Commission members.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and on behalf of the City Council and your neighbors throughout the city, thank you to each and every one of you for volunteering to serve the community in a way that requires a lot of care, a lot of work, I know a lot of reading, a lot of debates, sometimes some gut-wrenching choices that have to be made, but without citizens from our community, from a diverse array of backgrounds, places, and ideas, and lenses, we wouldn't be West Sacramento. We would just be a generic town USA, and we really, really very much appreciate the expertise of the commission as individuals and collectively. We've just completed a major project with, what do y'all call it here, ZOMP, with an exclamation point, in terms of the zoning ordinance modernization project and others, and you will have a long list of major projects, planning efforts, and small ones over the coming 2 years to grapple with. I will tell you, the City Council is in the midst of its 2.5-day retreat right now. We retreat all the way to the room right behind you for 2.5 days. And there are certainly some challenges on the horizon in the economy, some fiscal issues that are well known in local government, and many others. But for the most part, there's a lot of opportunity and tremendous possibilities, and most of those come together here in the work of the Planning Commission. And so I'm grateful to each of you for agreeing to serve. There have been some new members of the commission. I believe for the first time in two years, we have a fully staffed Planning Commission. And for the first time, the Planning Commission is in every part of the city. The majority of the Planning Commission is north of the Barge Canal, and commissioners are in every kind of neighborhood in West Sacramento, and it's one of the most diverse that we've had. Restored since Commissioner Austin left her private development work a few years back. We've tried to restore some private development expertise to the commission, and the community development perspective, and importantly, transportation expertise and that Commissioner Berliner brings to this work, and hopefully with some additional background in parking as well, and points of view on what is, I know, been a challenging issue for many members of the commission, as well as the deep expertise and care that the rest of the commissioners who've been here for many years have bring to the table. So thank you for your service. We're really excited about what's ahead. I will also tell you that we are, as part of our retreat, one area that is continually coming up is the radical changes in the mobility environment in the city, not just in our city, but certainly we are at the epicenter of that tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll be launching the new Jump scooters, starting 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock p.m., just as an advertisement. At the barn, we'll be doing a helmet giveaway, and there'll also be the waffle truck out there as well. And the helmets are free, and so are the waffles. So come on out, and even if you don't ride with a helmet, normally, if you've never ridden an electric scooter in West Sacramento, which is 99.9% of West Sacramentans, please start with a helmet, if nothing else, in order to maintain safety and kind of figure it out. But West Sacramento, a lot of transportation changes in our community with obvious implications for land use, and unfortunately, we don't get to tell you that we'll be moving to automated vehicles on September 27th, 2022. We don't know. It could be 10 years from now. It could be 6 months from now. Just as we had no anticipation of scooters a year ago or electric bike share 18 months ago. So the environment and the market and citizens' taste for change is changing much more rapidly than any of us can predict, and that poses a particular challenge for those of us working on infrastructure and for those of us in particular working on land use. So would encourage you to dive in. I know most of you are pretty wonky, and so this is your time to enjoy grappling with some really interesting social and infrastructure and land use and transportation issues all at once. And we have a lot of projects all over the city for you to engage in, including projects that we've taken up in the past, in whether in Southport or elsewhere in the city, that are fresh eye, given the current development environment and the changes in our land use and climate strategies, implications in those domains, but also throughout the city, and particularly in the waterfront zones. We'll also be tackling, through a set of strategies out of this retreat, affordability and gentrification as well. If you saw the article in the Bee a couple of weeks ago, we've had one of the highest property value appreciations in the entire region in West Sacramento, concentrated in the waterfront zones, but not exclusively. And so our safe harbor is a place with a challenge on affordability, but not as bad, which has kind of been our saving grace. It's just not as bad as it is on the other side of the river. That is changing rapidly. And so our investments in housing, our investments in mobility, and our policies on infrastructure development and on land use are going to have to adapt very quickly if we're to be able to sustain our small town, close-knit, diverse, integrated, economically integrated environment. So lots ahead. Enjoy it. And if you would please now stand and raise your right hand. And repeat after me. I state your name. Do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California. That I will, against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that I will take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter. Congratulations, Commissioners, and thank you for your service.
Thank you, Mayor Cabaldon, both for your leadership and for entrusting us with this important civic duty. I know it's a huge honor to everyone sitting up here. I would like to just take a brief moment for a quick informal introduction of our newest commissioners. If Aria and Brendan, who are both here tonight, if you just want to do a quick, hi, who are you? Your name? Okay, we'll go to Brendan first.
My name is Brendan Leonard. It's right there. I've lived in West Sacramento for 3.5 years, but admired West Sacramento from Midtown for many years prior to that. I'm proud to be here, and I love what's happening here, and I'm honored to be a part of helping shape its future and represent, all districts, but a perspective in what's happening in the Riverfront District and, the unique land use challenges that come from that. Glad to be here.
Wonderful. Welcome, Brendan. Aria?
Hi, I'm Aria Berliner. I've lived here since July, and I'm really honored to be here, and I'm just really excited for everything that the Planning Commission is going to have on the agenda in the next few months.
Wonderful. Welcome. I do want to recognize Commissioner Sablon, who is unable to be here this evening, but will swear in at our next meeting. I do want to welcome back and thank Commissioner Vu, who's returning as our alternate commissioner this year, and for being here this evening. With that, we will move into item B, the election of Planning Commission Chair and Vice Chair for 2019. I think we'll start this evening with nominations for Chair.
Mr. Chair, first I would like to thank you for serving us. I think you've done a great job as chair. At this time, I would like to nominate our vice chair, Francisco Castillo, to be chair.
Wonderful. Is there a second for Vice Chair Castillo?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Vu. Is there any other nominations for chair? Very well, then, I think we can take a vote for the chair of the Planning Commission for 2019. All in favor of Vice Chair Castillo becoming our new chair, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Very good. Congratulations, Chair Castillo.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
I'll go ahead and wrap up Vice Chair, and then we'll all move chairs at once, if that's okay. So we'll now take nominations for Vice Chair of the Commission for next year.
Mr. Stonefels, I'd like to nominate Russ Liebig to be the vice chair this year. The reason behind that nomination is I'm really excited about a lot of the new commissioners that are joining us, but I do think that it'd be great to have some folks who are experienced on the Planning Commission, familiar with our personalities, familiar with some of the projects, and certainly Mr. Liebig has the longest-running institutional knowledge on the Planning Commission.
I think that's an excellent nomination. I'd like to second it. Is there any other nominations for Vice Chair? All right, then. All in favor of Commissioner Liebig becoming Vice Chair for the 2019 year, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Very well, congratulations, Commissioner Liebig.
Thank you so
And with
much.
that, if everyone doesn't mind pausing while we all move chairs very awkwardly.
Well, we'll move on with the agenda. Thank you first to my fellow commissioners for electing me as chair. I think there's been quite a bit of projects that we were able to, that came before us for the past 2 years that we're proud of the outcome of many of those, and we had healthy debates in some of those, and I encourage the community that is watching to also come out and express their concerns, their ideas and interest to any of the projects that come before us. I think it's important to have that community input for all of our projects that we hear on our agenda. And so I look forward in the next year serving as your chair. Mr. Vice Chair, would you like to say a few words before we move on? No. All right. We'll move on to item C on the agenda, presentation by the public on matters not on the agenda within the jurisdiction of the commission. Is there any public comment? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to item D, correspondence and staff communications from the Planning Commission Secretary. Mr. Actually, we didn't elect?
David, do we
Planning
need to
Commission Secretary.
re-elect you or nominate you?
No, that is something you're stuck with me on. That is something we had always done over the years, and then we looked at it, and well, there's no real requirement for it, so, and I appreciate the fact that I don't have to sweat that one out each year. So I do have a couple items to note for you tonight, and I'm also going to have a couple of remarks from our city attorney tonight. But first of all, I would like to congratulate all of our new commissioners as well as our returning commissioners. I was excited to see a full house up there. We actually had to go find another chair to make sure we had one for everyone. I think this will benefit us greatly going forward, having a full commission and with all the representation on the commission, as the mayor stated. So something coming up really quickly, and it's a little surprising that we're getting such little notice on it, but the Planning Commissioners Academy is coming up next month, and it will be at the Queen Mary in Long Beach, March 6th through the 8th. This is something put on every year by the League of Cities, and it is probably one of the better training opportunities for planning commissioners out there, because it is solely for planning commissioners. So if anyone is interested in that, please contact me offline so we can discuss the logistics of it, because believe it or not, the registration deadline is Friday next week on the 15th, even though we just got this, I think, in the mail like yesterday. But looking at the program, it looks very much like a planning commission meeting in terms of the topics that they'll be addressing for planning commissioners. Also, I think the mayor mentioned our ZOMP with an exclamation point. That was one of our biggest endeavors at the Planning Commission last year. City Council did conduct first reading on that. at their previous meeting last month and are slated to conduct second reading on that at their next meeting in 2 weeks. At the first reading, the the council, was, I think, very complimentary of the work that the commission did on that and slogging through the minutiae so they could, really send to focus on, some of the bigger picture and policy matters. But they were very complimentary of the commission, and I believe rightfully so, because we did discuss that several times here last year. And then thirdly, I'd like to ask our attorney, Maggie Stern, to make a couple of comments regarding ex parte communications, and then also sort of procedurally when any commissioner may have to recuse him or herself from any given item.
Good evening, members of the commission. I wanted to just briefly talk about the process for recusing yourself in the event that you have a conflict of interest. Hopefully, if you observe that you may have a conflict of interest on an agenda coming up, that you'll touch base with Mr. Tilley in advance of the meeting to discuss the potential conflict, and that will give him an opportunity to give you advice about whether or not it's a situation where you should recuse yourself. Ultimately, you're responsible, however, for making that determination. So the process under the Political Reform Act for recusing yourself in the event of a conflict is to announce the conflict before discussion of the item, before the item is heard before the commission, state the general basis of that conflict, and then you actually need to leave the room while the discussion is taking place and a vote is taken on the item, and then you can return to the room afterwards. So that's the process for recusing yourself. I see that the next item on the agenda pertains to disclosure of ex parte communications. So an ex parte communication is a communication with one of the parties to a matter that's going to be appearing before you, either the applicant or someone who's opposed to a measure or an action that you're going to be taking. So if you have had one of those communications with someone outside of this proceeding tonight, you should disclose that communication when requested by the chairman on the agenda. Is that it? Okay, I think that covers it.
Yes, and that concludes our correspondence at this time.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda, consideration and approval of the minutes from the December 6, 2018 commission meeting.
Chair Castillo,
Oh, sorry.
the ex parte
Just-
communication
that's right.
item. Please.
Item E, my apologies, disclosure of ex parte communications. We'll start on the left with Commissioner Sternfeld.
Thank you, Chair. I did have a conversation with a member of the public regarding item number 2. I did receive some questions regarding the workshop that we'll hear this evening, and did direct them to city staff for additional questions.
Commissioner Berliner?
None?
No communications. We'll move, Commissioner Austin?
Like Mr. Sturmfeld, I received an email communication on item 2, and I did not respond to the email communication from a member of the public.
Commissioner Leonard?
No communications.
Vice Chair Liebig?
Nothing to report, thank you.
And I did receive an email communication for item number 2, but also did not respond to that communication. With that, we'll go to the consent agenda, consideration and approval of the minutes from December 6, 2018 commission meeting. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Chair Castillo, I move to approve the the minutes.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Move on to regular agenda. So item 2 on the regular agenda, it's a public workshop on proposed general plan amendments and rezone from mixed-use neighborhood, commercial to business park in Southport Industrial Park. So I will ask the commission to see if there are any conflicts
Yes.
of interest. All right.
As
Commissioner
my
Leonard.
first order of business as a new commissioner, I have to recuse myself from this. While not officially, seen as a conflict with the measurement of distances, my company does have a project that's nearby, and for the sake of, perception and just making sure that the applicants have, and the residents have a fair look. I just believe that it's best for me to sit this one out.
Thank you, Commissioner Leonard. Are there any others? All right, we'll wait for Commissioner Leonard to exit the room, and we'll continue on with staff presentation.
Yes, Senior Planner Justin Hardy will present this item.
Okay, all right. Senior Planner Justin Hardy, welcome new commissioners. I haven't been here in a while. For those I haven't seen in a while and new ones, great to have you here. So before you tonight is a request. I first wanted to start out kind of like, SIP, and for those that may not be familiar with it. So I've outlined in the yellow area generally where the SIP, which is Southport Industrial Park, lies. Southport Parkway goes directly through it. Northern border is the Deepwater Ship Channel, and Bridgeway Islands or lakes to the south. Some of the background on the industrial park: it was originally approved in 1982 by the county. In the subsequent year, 1983, PD 21, the plan development, was also approved by the county. Part of the city's incorporation in 1990, we inherited that approval. We did some amendments, identified some specific uses, entered into development agreements. The development agreement was further revised in 1997. That helped install the major backbone infrastructure and Palmadesi Bridge for additional access. Over the lifetime of the project, there have been approximately 3 ownership groups of various conglomerates. Ridge Capital has owned it, who is the applicant today, since 2013. Since it was originally approved, it was MU, mixed use, and so it's been there since its inception in 82, 83. When we did the general plan update in 2016, we added the neighborhood commercial component to it. So you could have a mixed housing unit and a retail office component, live-work type situation, and give it further, marketability, if you will. So far, no interest in that regard has come forth as an application. The other component is Southwark Framework Plan that was adopted in the mid-90s. It was kind of envisioned to have 4 nodes, 4 villages, each of them having their commercial component of it. It's materialized a little bit differently, but there is still some MUNC in this property across on the eastern side of Promenade. Yarborough has a component, and the next nearest one would be Gateway and Jefferson intersection. And going back to this, the inception and the design of the industrial park was to have your heavier and most intense uses on your Deepwater Ship Channel, and as you go to the east and the south, they would lessen in intensity. So you have your M2, M1, and then your business park, and in this case, the mixed use adjacent to residences that weren't necessarily contemplated when this project was put in and adopted originally. So the entitlements the applicant is seeking The general plan amendment is a legislative act. It is requesting to amend the land use from the mixed-use neighborhood commercial to BP Business Park. It would also change the zoning, which would be identical MUNC to BP. If ultimately they are successful in that change, all BP uses that are permitted by right would be permissible. If anything requires a use permit under BP, then it would come before you unless additional restrictions were placed in PD 21. If there were specific concerns, Commission directed staff, we could write those in. It also amend PD 21 to include any specific project site items. I'll get into those a little bit more in a minute. And then the amendments would also need to adjust the DA and the framework plan to accommodate any changes that forthcame as this project. So as a frame of reference, the above aerial gives you a perspective of the project site at Promenade and Southport Parkway. It's in red, I apologize, it's hard to see. So you have the MUNC, which is vacant land across the way on the western side, roughly 12 acres that is vacant, the project site. And then there's vacant BP land to the east and M1 slightly to the north. Ramco Street it's installed, it is not open yet. So I do have some images from that perspective coming up. So some of the raised issues and looking at the project, just using the experience over time, you do typically have a request like this that is with a specific user or a project, so you can identify the compatibility issues with the adjacent uses and the impacts, the ability for the project to operate without any constraints that would be unfair or hold them to a different standard that would make it impractical for them to operate. Without that, staff did review, potential uses and conflicts, and we made some recommendations in the report, and I'll get to those as well. Adjacent to the project to the east, as I showed earlier, it is BP as well. There are some additional constraints on that property, which is no truck docks within 350 feet of residential, the 800-foot masonry wall, which is already completed, landscape of 15 feet, and then an additional 15 feet for the building setback, maximum height of 36 feet. It's 45 feet on lot 5 and 6, but we're recommending for the amendment to PD 21 on this particular subject matter be limited to 36 feet in height. Independently, staff is working with other city staff to see if the southern portion of Ramco that is not open, mainly the southern elbow immediately adjacent to the residences, could be no parking for semis, parking, idling, early morning staging, and any other activity that could occur outside of, during sleeping hours that would affect them. Since it hasn't opened, we don't know, but it sounds like I've talked to police and parking enforcement. It needs to go through its process, but doesn't seem to be a problem to get that completed. I did receive a phone call today. Here's a recap of the conversation. She states that she can hear all truck activity, speakers, containers, banging, outdoor amplified speaker like a megaphone, and she says they're greater than 350 feet away, way beyond this project site. She hears noises sometimes till at least 1 a.m. in the morning, and she was concerned about parking and speeding along Ramco Street once it opens. She was somewhat alleviated of that concern when I let her know what we were attempting to do on that southern portion. I don't know if she's here tonight. She said she would attend. Real quickly, here is where it's cordoned off at Promenade. This one's a little bit closer, so you see the landscaping on the south side, and that's the vacant lot to the north. And then this is from the north looking southwest. The project site's off in the distance. And so to sort of recap and summarize, this is a study session for staff to receive direction from the commission, research anything that is needed, any items to include in the PD 21 that raise concerns, to address potential conflicts, noise, light, height, aesthetics, hours of operation, types of businesses that you'd want to potentially restrict that are permissible in the BP currently. This is a study session, so there's no formal action. In the future, the project would need to come back for a formal hearing and recommendation from council, or commission, excuse me, and then at that point, it would need to go to city council for ultimate decision on the matter. That concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. And I know the applicant is also here to make a presentation, I believe.
Correct.
And so with that, with the commissioners, do you want to have questions for staff now? Would you prefer we wait to hear the applicant first and then ask the questions? Okay. Commissioner Austin?
Actually, if you could, and you can go and look this up and respond, but I'd like you to be able to share here, mostly for the benefit of the public, of what types of uses are allowed just by right in the proposed zoning of business, business park.
Some of the uses could be and range from office to, sort of the lighter industrial. So trucks could be part of the equation, and we do have a limit of the setback there involved. I didn't bring a complete list of BP uses, but some of them could be outside the hours where traditional sleep hours would be. They could have conflicts potentially with those hours of operations. Since nothing's identified, I could certainly bring a full review of what potential uses could go in, or permitted uses could go in at the formal hearing, or provide you any of that information with that. The uses themselves, I don't have the full ordinance in front of me.
Yeah, excuse me, sorry. We'll look up some more of that stuff through the wonders of having a smartphone, and then we'll bring that back to you perhaps after we hear from the applicant.
Yeah, that's basically what I'm recommending. If you would want to provide a basic list, that would be excellent. Thanks.
Sure. Right. And Commissioner Sternfels, do you have any questions for the staff for now? No. Other commissioners, Commissioner Bruner? All right. Thank you, Mr. Hardy. We're going to hear from the applicant, if they can come forward and introduce yourself and who you're with or who you're representing, please. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, good evening. My name is Michelle Azevedo, and I am with Ridge Capital, Inc. Just a few points of clarification. Ridge Capital, Inc. doesn't actually own this property. We do represent the owners, which is essentially a pension fund, and they purchased the property in June of 2012. So I do know this property pretty well. We've been living it for many years. If it's possible to bring up the aerial again, that would be helpful. I just wanted to, I don't have a formal presentation. I just wanted to clarify a few things. When we became the asset manager or the development manager for the owner in 2012, there was approximately 300 acres that we were controlling. And since then, we've been very successful with the development of for many build-to-suits in the area on the BP and the M2 land, which unfortunately is not within that aerial. There is a bigger aerial, but we're just talking about this MU overlay zone. And what's a little bit awkward and what we don't have in front of you is the actual tentative map, because the MU overlay doesn't actually fit the map. It doesn't, the lots are not within that MU zone anymore. So,
If I may interrupt, Commissioners and Ms. Azevedo, Attachment 3 in your staff report does show the lotting a little more with the zoning overlay on it. So that may provide some more of the context that Ms. Azevedo is referring to, Attachment 3.
so over the last 6.5, 7 years, as we have been marketing the property and building it out, this land has always been out there in the back because of the MU overlay. We've done very well with the light industrial uses and the medium industrial uses, but there's been absolutely no demand or even interest in any kind of commercial use for this corner: retail, food, assembly, manufacturer, residential, absolutely none. We have had and have right now an R&D user that is looking at some of this property, and this is the perfect spot for it. It is a larger building, but they do need some warehouses. They don't have a lot of truck traffic, very little truck traffic, actually, but it's still a big building. But we thought that this would be a lovely spot to put the building because it needs parking, and we could make it very nicely landscaped. I obviously cannot tell you who they are, or I would tell you who they are. There's actually another R&D use kind of rumbling around town as well. This is another spot where we would like to put them, but with the current zoning, we're not allowed to put them because we cannot have more than a certain number of square feet of warehousing, which is why we're coming to you to ask you to rezone the property from MU to BP, because if you flip back to the tentative map, you can see that it's within the BP park. It's like directly adjacent to BP and M1 land. So trying to get a use that is not BP related, and you had a question, what does BP allow? It's actually very broad. You could put office there, but there's no office user that wants to go there. We have proposed many times office space, but it's too far out of town for an office user. There was one office building built in the park, and it was not very successful, and there's currently a school there, and it seems a little misplaced to me, but that's my own opinion. It can be warehouse, distribution. It cannot have a yard space. There cannot be truck yards like there is across Southport in the heavy industrial. There is a use restriction that Justin mentioned, 350 feet away from the residential. You cannot have truck courts or truck parking, staging, that kind of thing, maneuvering. We would continue that same restriction. We have no problem with that. There is, we also recommended additional setbacks, which would work perfectly well within our plan. Height restriction is kind of a little, that one's a little bit strange to me because the two lots that are right next door have 45-foot height restrictions, and I'm not saying we would build a building that high. But I'm not sure what an MU height restriction is, but I feel that it's higher than 36 feet. I'm not as certain that we would like to have a height restriction within the park, just because because the parcel lines are not exact. It doesn't match the overlay. But that is why we're here. We're trying to continue the development of the property. The park has been fairly successful under our management, I feel, and we could bring some, more very good businesses and jobs to the area. I don't have anything else unless, here's an irony. I know that noise and light, those are complaints that have come from the neighborhood. And we fully support you making Ramco Street no parking. I mean, we wouldn't want trucks to be idling on the street there. That's been on the books forever. We just built it. We didn't plan it. We just built it out for you. But we would definitely be supportive of that, and it should be no parking. The buildings in and of themselves are the best sound blocker ever. So once development actually happens, the sounds from the other side of the business park will be stopped by the buildings. We haven't done an acoustical study for this part, but we did on the east side of the property. And I'm not sure, we haven't heard from residents lately on the sound, but the taller buildings do block the sound from the FedEx and the other facilities that, depending upon when the wind blows, they can be a little bit noisy. You can hear some of the beepers, but those are the all-night facilities, which are actually across the channel. They're not even in the park. So unfortunately, I can't control those. But we're respectfully here, just asking for a rezone. And I'm happy to answer any other questions or respond to any comments.
Thanks, Ms. Acevedo. Before we take questions from the commissioners, I don't have any request to speak cards for public comment. So if you are interested in speaking on this item, you can fill out a little card and it'll get it to me and we'll call you up. But in the meantime, we'll go to questions from commissioners for staff, and Ms. Acevedo, we'll start with Commissioner Sternfels.
Sure. Nice to see you, Ms. Acevedo. Thanks for coming. My question may be for both you and city staff, so I apologize in advance if you both have to take a turn to answer. But so we just wrapped up the general plan 2 years ago. We added the mixed-use overlay at that time, right, for this parcel? So what was the thinking then, and why that was the appropriate course of action, and in kind of relationship to what we're being asked to consider tonight?
Well, the property in question was zoned mixed use, has been zoned mixed use all along. We sort of morphed that into the mixed use neighborhood commercial as one of the new land use designations in the general plan. But the property was about 5 acres, has been mixed use, really forever. What we did do in the general plan was the property across the street that Michelle's organization also represents. We did put mixed use on that property at their request through the general plan, because it was a neighborhood commercial site. And I think as she mentioned, there hasn't been very many nibbles on either one of these properties in all these years. So we tried to get a zoning designation on, especially the much larger piece, which is about 12 acres, to have a lot more flexibility, to see if there was some additional users that then might become interested in that property. But the one on the east side of Promenade, that's the subject tonight, has been mixed use, even before the general plan update.
Okay, so the neighborhood commercial piece that we did with the general plan was more a function of changing the mixed use to mixed use neighborhood commercial on all mixed use properties?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any other questions at this time. Thanks.
Commissioner Berliner.
So I'm not sure if this was addressed, but there are vacant BP lots to the east, right? Yeah, to the east and north of this proposed change lot. Your client does not own those, right?
Yes, some yes, and we do as
Okay.
well. The property, Ridge Capital purchased 25 acres last year. So the property on the east side of Ramco Street, that is closest to the Cormark building, there's 2 lots that run along the east property line. Those are Ridge Capital lots, and then there's one that is, there's a cul-de-sac that just went in, Mary Place, so it's on the north side of Mary Place. The fund owns, there's a little lot down below on the southern portion of Mary Place, and the rest of the BP lot in the whole block that we're talking about right now.
And we're going to put up an exhibit that'll hopefully illustrate that a little better.
I have one, but I think Justin has it. So that's actually not a bad one. Oh. Well, that's actually a good one. That's a good one, too. That's perfect. Thank you. Hey, our website actually has been very recently updated. Thank you, Susan. So lots 55, 59, and 58, those are Ridge Capital lots that we purchased from the fund, as well as 41 on the other side of the park. The land that is still owned by the fund are 56, 57, and then the 51 through 54. So you can see that the lot lines are a little bit different than the overlay, which is more of a, I don't know what you call the shape, but those are still owned by the fund. And so the height limitations so far had been all of the properties along the east boundary. So the Core-Mark identified buildings, and then lots 5, 9, and 5, 8 also have a height restriction of 36 feet. 5, 6, and 5, 7 they all have the 350-foot residential setback, so no truck docks or staging areas in that 350 feet. There's a park down in the corner, so the line kind of comes in and then it comes back up and over. So 5, 7, 5, 3, 5, 2, 5, 1 potentially would all be restricted within that 350 feet, no truck docks or staging or anything like that. The height restriction doesn't impact lots 5-2 and 5-3. I don't know why, but that's just the way PD 21 was. I would also argue against the height restriction for 5-1 because really right across the street from lot 5-1 is it's not residential, it's quasi-public. Nobody knows what it's going to be, but it's not going to be residential. And so the houses are not really butting up against the lot 5-1. So that would be my one request, so to speak. The road is in, the wall is in, there's landscaping on that side of the roadway. On the other side of the roadway, there would be at least 15 feet of landscaping as well.
Any other questions?
Not at this time, thank you.
Commissioner Vu.
No questions at this time, but maybe later.
Thank you. Commissioner Austin?
No questions. I just wanted to follow up and see if staff had a response for uses allowed by right for the business park zoning areas.
Yeah, so, there's some uses under, health services or some are permitted. Business services are fairly permitted, delivery services permitted, drafting, janitorial, office, ambulance service, some restaurant orientations or equipment sales and repair, business office, messenger services, other business services types.
Yeah, thank you for indulging me. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Vice Chair Liebig?
Yeah, Justin, I'm going to spin right off that. I think we're probably going to end up having a conversation about cannabis at some point, maybe at the next meeting. So what are the setbacks from residential for cannabis businesses?
We don't have a specific setback for cannabis business as related to residential. Under Business Park, as I'm going off memory, I believe the only cannabis use we allowed in Business Park was the testing labs. All the other cannabis uses would need to be in one of the industrial zones, one of the M zones.
Thank you. Thank you. That actually answers my question even better. I do have a question for Ms. Azevedo. Is the lack of commercial need simply a function of the residential build-out? In other words, have we not reached critical mass for neighborhood commercial in that area? Or are we there? Are we built out and just still, there's no need?
I don't think it's large enough, the demand is large enough. I'm by no means an expert, but when we enlist the aid of brokers and, marketing people, and even if we have friends that have restaurants or coffee places or that much, and we've brought them out there, and they're just like, no. There's not enough demand here to make a business go. They need to be on a more, let's say Jefferson Boulevard or a main street. So we have tried. We have a lot of things going on in downtown Sacramento as well, and we have brought some of our clients out to Southport because obviously we'd love to accommodate their needs there, but it's just no. The answer is no. And so, and as far as the land, the commercial property across Promenade too, we are very appreciative that the mixed-use zoning was applied to that, because there's a possibility that at some point in time, there may be some residential. There will not be 12 acres of commercial there. That's a huge area of land for a little neighborhood shop. And what we wouldn't want to build, and frankly, we don't do commercial really, but we would sell to somebody that would, but it's too big, and you don't want a neighborhood shop that's going to fail. I mean, you don't want a revolving door of, I don't know, nail salons and hair, I don't know. Don't look at me, I'm not the expert there. So that is very helpful to have on the west side of the street, the flexibility there. Unfortunately, when you've got the property that is, literally directly adjacent to M1 and light industrial land, the uses don't seem compatible. You're not going to get residential uses there. Would we love to put a restaurant there? Yes, but no restaurant wants to go there. Can we attract some really high-paying professional jobs? Maybe if we could put more of an R&D kind of warehousey kind of thing there? Yes, that is feasible and possible. And so that's what we would hope to do.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, would you like our general comments at this time as well, or do you want to do another
Yeah,
round?
just really quick, I have a question too, if one of the comments that you made was regarding the height restriction, and just wanted to get some clarity from staff in terms of how did staff come up with the 36 feet height restriction for that particular parcel versus the other height restrictions that are next to it, which
Yeah,
is different?
I don't have the PD 21 text in front of me, but it was developed, around the same time the framework plan was being developed, actually a little bit afterward. In the light industrial and business parks section of the Southport Design Guidelines, does reference actually a 35-foot height limit for any buildings that are within 350 feet of any existing or proposed residential buildings. And that also references the 350-foot truck dock setback. The design guidelines, just, for the commission, they do provide that the planning commission can allow for some additional height. So it sounds like, 35 feet is really where we're starting, but the planning commission does have some latitude there if they wish to, and that's in the Southport Design Guidelines, section 7.4.
PD 21 allows for 36 feet.
Okay, well, then
No.
they work in concert.
Splitting hairs.
Yeah, they work in concert.
Yeah.
And both documents are applicable here. And also, the one we should note also is, at least by virtue of having the development agreement, they are vested in a previous version of the zoning ordinance. The BP land uses really haven't changed that much since then. It is generally as what Mr. Hardy described. But the height limits and dock settings in the BP area are there, and I do believe that those have been somewhat effective out there as the docks have been more internalized as development has approached and marched eastward for when it started more on the west side of the business park.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Acevedo before I think we move to providing input to staff, input and direction to staff regarding the project?
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Turn back to the commissioners, and we can start off with Commissioner Austin and see if you have any comments to staff.
Indeed, thank you. So I've got several comments, so that's what I believe you're here for today. So first of all, I really do appreciate staff presentation, the work that went into this, and I do appreciate some of the proactive work that you've done in providing some possible conditions of approval. So that's really valuable. So there's two things that I think about as we consider this. One is with mixed-use neighborhood commercial, there's housing and commercial uses. So my first question is, are we meeting the housing demands in our city that this type of zoning would facilitate? And I think we really are. I think we're actually above and beyond what we what's expected of a city of our size. And so for me, I kind of check off that box. The second is the question around commercial, and I'll address that in a moment. So the other thing I think about is the biggest thing that I'm thinking about now is this transition of uses, right? So you have very industrial uses in this particular area, and you also have housing and schools, and it's you know, this is really a critical school and park for the Southport neighborhood. And so I think about how important it is to have transition of uses in an area like this. So when I was kind of scrolling through my mental Rolodex, I liken this to the Port District area. And I bring this up because, for example, you have residences along Park Boulevard, and then you have like medical offices, you also have business offices along Harbor, and so I think that's a really good example of what I would like to see in this area. Those uses are the types of uses that are allowed under the business park zoning and designation, so that might be a comment for you and for your colleagues, that type of model, again, offices, medical offices, there are some restaurants. Those are the kinds of things that we would like to see in the areas that are nearer to the residential and the areas that are public, quasi-public areas. And then just highlighting, I don't know how successful this is for either the property owners or the tenants, but I do want to note that there is a place of worship and also a recreational center geared towards youth in that area on the other side of Promenade. And those are the kinds of uses I think that residents in the area are really supportive of, at least anecdotally. So then I start thinking about, okay, so I don't want to kind of split hairs, but I do think that location matters. And so something that I would want to think about is where the proposed Ramco and Promenade would connect. I think that those areas that are very close to residential, we should really work to pursue the kind of businesses I was talking about, those sort of transition businesses that are not necessarily very industrial, heavy on trucking, maybe kind of outside regular business hours. I would save those for the portion of Ramco that would be adjacent directly to Southport Parkway. So those are the kinds of things that I would like to consider, and I don't know if that's something that we would put into this recommendation, but that's something both for the applicants to consider as well as staff as they take our comments into consideration. Make sure that I've hit all of my pieces. And then I do want to highlight something for people who might be tuning in. There's uses that are allowed by right. If there are other uses that are not like the ones that were listed by senior planner, those require that they come before us for a public hearing, and that people who own property or are residents within the vicinity will be noticed and have an opportunity to know that those things are coming forward. And that might be something that Commissioner Liebig may want to address if and when he brings up any questions about cannabis. And then last but not least, in the conditions of approval, I don't have something specific, but at the top of my mind, I'm thinking about a really tragic crash that happened between two families along Southport Parkway, and I really want to make sure that we're building in safety components. Now, from what I understand, those were both like single occupancy or just regular cars. I don't believe that they involve trucks, but I want to make sure that we're building in the, traffic safety and other considerations so that as we have mix of uses where we have, large trucks, we do have people going to their offices and we do have residents and people dropping their children off at school, that we're being proactive in some of the safety considerations. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Austin. Vice Chair Liebig?
I'm going to echo Ms. Austin's comments, but in addition, just a comment for staff. We seem to have a mismatch of maps, and so maybe next time this comes back, we can, for example, the project proponent's map doesn't quite align with attachment 2. So it would help show the issues that the applicant is bringing up regarding the PD 21 overlay and the current zones regarding the existing lot sizes. Otherwise, that's my only remaining comment.
Thanks. Commissioner Sternfeld?
Yes, just briefly, I think Commissioner Austin hit the point, and I may take it a little further. I appreciate that the MUNC use may not work best here, zoning, but opening up to all business park may not be the best, result in the best transitional use of this property, and I think it's got to be the right type of business park use to transition from the residential area into the business park. And I don't know how we would make that work. So that's the crux of it, right? You almost need the perfect transition type business park use to be on this site and be built in a way that's not going to make the community this close to it hate it, and add value, and also do the things that Ms. Azevedo is trying to do for her clients. And so I don't know how we do that, but I'm pretty tentative to make a sweeping change to business park and just say, yeah, as long as it's business park, we're good, because it's that, as hard as of a parcel as it is to find a good tenant for, it's one we could really easily screw up if we just let any business park tenant build there. And so while I'm very understanding of Ms. Azevedo's in her client's needs, I'm also trying to figure out how we can thread the needle with getting the right tenant and use built out on that site in particular, at least if it's the one that I understand from the staff presentation on the corner there and how it transitions. So that is my feedback, and it's probably not helpful at all, but
Just chiming in, I mean, yeah, I think the question is do we have another alternative? And maybe it's not a zoning, maybe it's a special planning district or something else, and maybe it's conditions of approval, but I think that's what you're seeking, is give us the tools that we need to make kind of a nuanced decision on this. Is that helpful?
no, I think that's right. I think I would be uncomfortable with changing the zoning just to business park. It allows for too many things that I think would be the wrong thing at this site, as far as transitioning from the residential and the school and the parks to the industrial park. But there are certain types of business park that would be awesome. And a research development facility may be one of those, but I don't know if I could answer that tonight, especially without having a plan or an actual application before us. So again, perhaps unhelpful, but if there's ideas that staff have on ways we can thread the needle here to make it work for both, I think that's what I would hope we could get to.
Yeah, there are, fortunately, with the plan development overlay here, we do have some additional tools at our disposal. I think we have similarly grappled with this a little bit by, some BP uses, may be good here, some may not be. But we will try to work on that a little further and go through the matrix and then with the landowner, and, see if there's a sweet spot that we can all get to on this.
Any other questions, Commissioner Sternfeld?
Nope, that was it. Thanks.
Commissioner Berliner?
I just want to echo everything that Commissioner Sternfeld and Austin said, but then also say that I really agree with Commissioner Sternfeld, especially if there are other possible sites that are owned by or managed by the applicant. So, yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner Vu.
Yeah, I think Commissioner Sturmfield's really captured my sentiments perfectly, and then I share his concerns as well, and, just to make this blanket change to Business Park. I can foresee, and I think we've already heard from some of the residents there about, the increase in traffic, especially of trucks, noise, light. Ultimately, it depends on what type of businesses do decide to come in. So it's hard for us to really cast too much judgment at this point without knowing, what would be coming in, and we can make better decisions once we do know. But I do share a lot of Mr. Sturmfield's and Ms. Austin's concerns about this. And, I think ultimately, though, whoever does come in, I do recommend that they do, and the management group does a lot of outreach to the public and hold a lot of public hearings, and just to make everyone aware of, what some of these new businesses coming in are, and what the implications would be to their community.
Thank you. And just really quick, I think we've heard from the commission. Open it up again to see if there's anything else that commissioners would want to say. I think we recognize that something needs to be done, and it is clear in our report that the land will remain undeveloped indefinitely because we cannot attract a certain business the way it is zoned now. And I don't think any of the commissioners or city would want that land to remain underdeveloped indefinitely. And so I think it is trying to find that middle ground. And I agree, there are concerns with noise, there's concerns with safety. My son goes to Bridgeway and he walks to Bounce Spot, just takes that street right on Promenade. A lot of kids do that. And so with big trucks, just thinking of big trucks in that area, just one of the things we want to think about are what are those different types of businesses, and have a thoughtful discussion next time around on what some of those businesses look like, and look at what those development restrictions are, what are some noise mitigation efforts, and also lighting. I used to live right on San Nicolas Road, which is right behind on that area as well, which is the property that's behind those homes there. And it's pretty, you can hear some of the concerns that the resident mentioned in the slide that were identified by Mr. Hardy. Those are legitimate concerns, and I guarantee you that not only she or he has those concerns, but many people in that community have those same concerns too. So I'm not opposed to completely scratching this off in terms of not doing anything, because I recognize we need to do something, but I think the commission really wants to try to figure out a way to find a middle ground and identify what those restrictions are in a clear way, so that when we do move forward to changing it, then I think we have a clear understanding amongst, for the project, the applicant and staff of what we can do there. So any other comments for and input for staff before we close this out? And did you receive adequate feedback? If you look, okay.
Yes, we have. Thank you.
All right. With that, we'll close this item, and there's no action, so we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. And before that, we'll want to...
Chair Castillo, while we retrieve Commissioner Leonard, and also noting that we neglected to provide everybody water and that it is quite warm in here, we will be securing some water for everyone in the meantime, and then we will get Commissioner Leonard and then move on to item number 3.
Thank you.
Should somebody go get him?
I think they went, oh, he's out that way? I know.
The chair has left the room. It's my opportunity. I know. I was like,
He was in the back.
what's that?
He was in the back. He's coming out.
Oh. How do you sneak? Oh, Jesus, that was long. That was long.
All right, we'll move on to, we have commissioners present, so we'll move on to item number 3, which is a public hearing regarding proposed River Oaks vesting tentative subdivision map 5139 at 3031 Village Parkway and 1525 Lake Washington Boulevard. Before we begin, are there any commissioners that need to recuse themselves?
I do.
Okay, and can you state just briefly the reason why?
I live very close to the proposed development, and I'm in the process of purchasing a home from the same developer that is developing this project.
Thank you, Commissioner Berliner. We'll see you at the next item. All right, we'll hear a presentation by Ms. Kathy Allen regarding this project. We're just waiting for Commissioner Sternfeld, but we can go.
There he is. Okay. Good evening, Chair Castillo and members of the commission. The item before you is a vesting tentative subdivision map for the creation of 116 residential lots, a landscape pedestrian access lot, and an open space lot. The project size is 19.3 acres and is located south of Lake Washington Boulevard and east and west of Village Parkway. The project will be accessed from a newly constructed street which will be located off of Village Parkway on both sides of Village Parkway. The project includes a roundabout that will be constructed where the current three-way stop is located at Lake Washington and Village Parkway. And the project also includes the construction of frontage improvements along Village Parkway, such as curb gutter sidewalks, landscaping, and a median. Those will be completed as well as part of the project. One aspect of this project that's somewhat different from other subdivisions in Southport that you have dealt with in the past has to do with the sidewalk configuration. And I'm going to turn the presentation over at this time to Wendy Williams from our engineering division to kind of give some background on that.
Thank you. Welcome, Ms. Williams.
Good evening, Chairman and Commission members. We wanted to point out to you that why this project would be a little different with the sidewalk configuration. The Southport design guidelines provide for a 56-foot wide right-of-way. That includes a 4-foot sidewalk and a 5.5-foot planter that is between the sidewalk and the curb and gutter. And you see that configuration over most of Southport that has that separated sidewalk. Actually, the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, was changed in 2010 and became effective in 2012 to require that if an accessible route, which includes a sidewalk, is not at least 5 feet wide, then you must provide places where people can pass or turn around every 200 feet or less. So there's a couple of ways to deal with that. Either you can provide the 5-foot sidewalk and not have to worry about anything, or if you don't provide the 5-foot sidewalk, you have to either widen out every 200 feet, and you get this interesting undulating kind of thing, or you provide it some other way. If you try to do that still staying within your 56-foot wide right-of-way, you would end up taking that out of the landscape strip every time you needed that turnaround space. Unfortunately, our landscape strips, staff feels that they're not wide enough anyway for healthy trees. Last year alone, the Parks Department removed over 50 trees because they were dealing with broken sidewalk and curb and gutter, and they knew that additional damage was imminent, so they would go ahead and just take out the trees. So we've done that over 50 times just last year. So those landscape strips are just not wide enough. So what we approached the developer with is, we have to meet ADA, but we don't really want you taking it out of the landscape strip. So we came up with a plan where they would do monolithic curb, gutter, and sidewalk. That's where the curb and gutter is immediately adjacent to the sidewalk. The landscape would be on the homeowner's side of the sidewalk, outside of the typical public utility easement, which is about 10 feet. So the trees would end up in the front yards. So that's, it's just an explanation of why we're heading that way. So.
Thank you. Any other comments from staff before we move on to the public hearing?
That basically concludes our presentation. There are representatives for the applicant here, should you have questions for them. I believe they also have a short presentation for you. Staff is recommending approval of the project as we feel all the findings for the project can be made.
Thank you. Thank you, and we'll have questions, we'll have you come back up if we have any questions. We'll go ahead and open the public hearing, and then have the applicant come up and do a presentation if they have any, or any comments they'd like to make before commissioners, before staff and applicant takes questions from commissioners.
Good evening, Chairman Castillo, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Dick Sestero, representing Seacon Homes, the developer of this project. We've been working on this for quite a few months with our consultants and city staff, so we're very happy to get to this point. Our consultant, they were here this evening, Jeff and Paul with Wood Rogers, and they've done a really good job to this point. We've worked out all the issues, I think. We're at kind of at a crossroads, so this location is a number of things going on. Along West Lake Washington, we're going to be putting a Class 1 bike path that I think eventually will get extended to the west. The other thing we're doing is we're putting a trail connection to the future levee pedestrian trail at the back of the project. And so we think those will be very good features. As Kathy mentioned, we're widening Village Parkway, putting in landscaping, putting a median, and I think will be very good. And then we also have two different villages with two different lot sizes, and we'll have a variety of homes of several different types. We have some few pictures tonight, which I think are possibly in your staff reports, but we're building the Newport Meadows project to the north, which you may be familiar with, but you can see the architecture. We're, really the latest architecture, and I think it'll be very, very attractive here. Also, we worked through, rather than putting a traffic signal at Village Parkway and Lake Washington, we're going to do a roundabout like has been done up at Stonegate, which you're probably familiar with, and that way you avoid having a signal, any long-term, maintenance of a signal. And so I think that's a good choice. Also, as Wendy mentioned, we're in favor of the monolithic sidewalks. We think it's a good idea. I think in the past, when you have a planter strip and then people get out of their car into the planter strip, the monolithic sidewalk, I think, is good, and it keeps the trees out from being next to the street, and there have been a lot of problems with that, so we're all in favor of that. And then we will, by the way, have an affordable housing agreement as a condition, but it's, yeah, something we're prepared to do. And the option will be either to build affordable homes or to pay an in lieu fee, which I think has been preferable from the city's standpoint, so that those fees can be used in one good location to possibly to create a project. But we will have an affordable housing agreement as part of the project. And we are, by the way, we are consistent with the general plan and the zoning for the property. We're not changing any of that. And then finally, we are in agreement with all the conditions of approval. And so we'd love to proceed and be happy to answer any questions you have, but we would be, really appreciate if you would approve our tentative map so we can move ahead.
Thank you. Before we take questions from commissioners, are there any members of the public? I have no speaking cards, but if there are members of the public, if you could fill out a little card and it'll get to us. With that, we'll take questions from commissioners for the applicant before we close the public hearing. So, Commissioner Sternfeld, any questions?
I do, and Ms. Williams, this question may be for you, but it may also be for our counselor. So, if I understood correctly, the reason for the monolithic sidewalk is because the 4-foot requirement would require some kind of passing lane every 200 feet, and that would look funny. This may be a really silly question, but wouldn't the driveways count as a passing area? And if not, why not?
So one of the options that we also discussed with the developer is that you could use the driveways as the passing space, as long as the driveways were 5 feet wide, and then you would start the steepness of the driveway. So that, if you're still trying to stay within the 56-foot right-of-way traditionally, you could end up with steeper driveways than you would normally have. And we would also need to make sure that we have either an easement or additional right-of-way that it comes out so that we have public access space. But it could be done that way.
So, but it would have to be on the same grade.
It would have to be the same grade, no more than 2% cross slope, which would match the existing, the proposed sidewalk. And we would have to jog the right-of-way or add easement, but that's another way to address the requirement.
Got it. And then, thank you, very helpful. Just to confirm with the applicant then, that the solution before us tonight is your preferred solution for this issue?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. That's all.
Commissioner Vu? Next, Commissioner Austin. Commissioner Leonard. Questions?
Yes, just a few quick ones. Did you do any sort of outreach to the neighbors in the surrounding property before submitting the application? Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
We have not made an outreach to the neighbors. No.
Okay. I see on the map that there are some areas adjacent to those existing landowners or existing residents where there might be a slight elevation difference in the rear yards. Are you anticipating the need for any retaining walls along those existing properties?
I don't believe we are, but I think if there are any, they may be small, but I think we're going to be lower than the adjacent property.
Okay.
And by the way, all the neighbors were notified of the meeting tonight,
Sure.
which.
Sure. All right. How about, I didn't see on here, are there any stop signs on Village Parkway on the interior of the?
There will be stop
project?
signs when our project enters Village Parkway. Right now, there are stop signs at Village Parkway and Lake Washington.
Right.
Which again will be replaced with the roundabout. But we'll have stop signs where we enter Village
Okay.
Parkway.
Okay, I didn't see that anywhere in there. And then for the CEQA checklist, were there any outside technical documents that you guys provided to staff, or did they do the entire CEQA checklist on the general plan?
We use the within the scope method due to the fact that the general plan is relatively new, and that was the technical memo that was one of the attachments to this. So we basically found that the project was consistent with the general plan. So you were asking if there were like technical studies. I'm sorry, I misunderstood your
Yes.
question. There was a cultural report done
Very good.
and a bio report.
Okay. I didn't see those reports referenced in the checklist. I think all the references were just to the general plan. All right. And last, have you explored what a CFD here might cost or the HOA fees might be?
I don't think we've looked at the cost, but I think it's be somewhat limited. You know, we have just some landscaping and trails, and, you know, those would be maintained, I think, with our CFD. There's an existing CFD out in that area that we may be able to annex into,
Okay.
but that would be the plan.
Very good. All right. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Commissioner Leonard. Commissioner Liebig?
Thank you. Actually, I don't have any questions for the applicant. I do have questions for staff after the public hearing.
Great. If there are no other questions, I don't have questions for the applicant. Thank you very much,
Thank
sir,
you.
for the presentation. At this time, if there's no public comments, we will close the public hearing. And we'll move it back to commissioners for questions for staff. So Commissioner Liebig, you want to go ahead and?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. First thing I want to do is thank staff and the applicant. This is a very complete application, and I was able to answer most of my questions just by reading the report, which I know that sounds silly, but sometimes it's very difficult when you get so many packets. So I do want to clarify one thing. Outreach was performed as normal, and there were no comments to staff, no additional letters on this project?
No comments from the public, save for one. We did have a resident in an adjoining property come to our office yesterday and inquire about the project.
Okay. And I'm sure they were known that there was a hearing tonight?
Yes, they were.
Okay, thank you. One clarification I did want to make, and I did discover this, and thank you for forwarding on the larger maps of the vegetation plan, but the new sidewalks, and just to confirm, do not apply to the Village Parkway, correct? It's just to the interior of the project?
Just the interior.
Okay. Thanks. That was actually my biggest concern with the sidewalks, is just to make sure that we have consistency as we're going down Village Parkway and the roundabouts. I mean, it's a really nice road. I'd like to keep that design consistent as you're moving from north to south, vice versa. Inside the development, I'm going to actually defer any comments on the sidewalks to Bernadette and maybe Andrew, who actually live nearby in those neighborhoods. But I like the proposal as is. I did want to note that, of course, we're adding more and more housing, especially to Southport. Village Parkway is new. I think it's a great arterial to help our residents get towards the freeway. We also have the Mike McGowan Bridge, which is critical for dividing up the traffic. So it's not really concentrating as much on Jefferson. And of course, there's the planned Broadway Bridge and the 15th Street Bridge to help disperse and get cars off of the freeway that are going into Sacramento. So I know we're adding a lot more housing. There's going to be more to come, but trying to address it with additional traffic infrastructure at the same time, or planning it as we build out. So it's especially important for Southport, as I think Southport tends to be more dependent on cars, individual cars, than neighborhoods on the north side of town. So, Kathy, I have a couple of very specific questions. Just in general, how do the lot sizes compare to the adjacent neighborhood?
They're relatively similar to other Newport product in the vicinity.
Okay. That's what I was guessing. I just pulled up my calculator. I got a 0.17 acres. I think somewhere in here is about 4,500 square feet, 4,483 square feet on average. So, and then with the zoning, this is R1. You have R1-B. Could you refresh my memory? What's dash B?
It's the R1 areas that are south of the Barge Canal in the framework plan area.
Thank you. Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. On my left, Commissioner Sternfeld. Commissioner, for any questions, just directed to staff.
No question, just quick comment on regarding the sidewalks. We have several other areas in Southport and even on this side of Jefferson that have the monolithic sidewalk, including Linden and all the tree streets, which were the older neighborhoods. But that's kind of what I like about this project, is it's kind of marrying the old and new. It's different than certainly all the other newer neighborhoods, but it's not like it's the only thing in this side of Jefferson and Southport that would have the monolithic sidewalk. So I don't have a heartburn over that at all. Appreciate it's a creative solution to a challenging but important problem we solve that makes sure we're designing with accessibility in mind, and appreciate the efforts taken by the proponents to figure that out. And I also just wanted to say a gracious nod to really thinking about the community and what the community's needs are, and including the bike and ped infrastructure into the project. The Parks Department surveyed the city last year, and bike and ped infrastructure and additional trails was the #1 thing that came up among our residents that they wanted more of. And so your thought and attention to that in detail and what you've put before us is greatly appreciated. It shows you're paying attention to the community and their needs. And I also appreciate the nod to what will soon hopefully be a future trailhead, to a really cool levee trail that we have in the works for the future. So thank you to the applicant on those items. I don't have any concerns with the project. I'm happy to move it forward when the rest of the commission's ready.
All right, Commissioner Vu.
No comments.
Any other questions on my right or comments for the staff? All right, Commissioner Austin?
Sure, yeah, I want to echo Commissioner Sternfeld's, sorry, I forgot your name there for a minute. I want to second Commissioner Sternfeld's comments on the active transportation components. I really appreciate that. Connectivity is really important. When I hear from existing residents in this particular area in Southport, they are really interested in connectivity. That includes being able to have children be able to walk and bike safely to their neighborhood school, as well as to connect to services and goods and recreation, whether it's at the Southport Town Center or to Levy Recreation Area access. So thank you for those. I am supportive of staff recommendation, and I'd be interested in hearing from Commissioner Leonard on if he has any request to modify the second recommended action related to the EIR before we move forward with the staff, with our recommendations for approval.
Commissioner Leonard.
Oh, thank you for that. No, that's fine. My question was just because, especially when it comes to cultural resources and some other technical aspects, staff will analyze project-specific data that's supplied by the applicant. And in this case, staff relied all on the city's general plan, EIR, which is totally sufficient. And so I'm fully satisfied with that. Thank you.
All right. And Commissioner Vice Chair Liebig, any final comments or questions?
No final comments. Thank you.
All right, well, with that, I'm also supportive of the project. I think it's a complete application and do appreciate the connectivity thinking behind that, and the trail connection and future, the bike paths, and it's consistent, obviously, with what we're moving towards as a city, encouraging our residents to use other modes of transportation. So appreciate the applicant for taking that into consideration in their application as well. So is there a motion to move the project forward?
Move staff recommendation, certify the city's use of the general plan EIR as being sufficient, and approving the requested tentative subdivision map subject to the conditions and findings in the staff report.
Thank you, Commissioner Sternfeld. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Commissioner Austin. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? None. The motion carries. Thank you.
Any interested party may appeal the decision of the Planning Commission in this matter to the City Council by filing a written appeal with the city clerk within 10 days of tonight's action, and that appeal must be accompanied by the appropriate filing fee.
All right, we're going to go ahead and call Commissioner Berliner back. And I know, I think she's out there. Oh, there she is.
Somebody will get it, I'm sure. Plus, there are TVs out there, and it's. There's some back there. Oh. I think they were off, though. Oh, were they? Oh.
All right, so with that, we're going to continue on with our agenda. I know, excuse Commissioner Sternfels, I know he's not feeling well tonight, so we'll move on to item number 4. A public hearing regarding proposed conditional use permit for building materials manufacturing at 1550 Parkway Boulevard. We'll have a staff presentation by Ms. Allen.
This item is a CUP for building materials manufacturer at 1550 Parkway Boulevard, which is located in the heavy industrial zone. As a bit of background, previously in 2005, the Planning Commission did approve a use permit for this applicant to move their facility from Fifth Street in the Bridge District to this location. That CUP was subsequently modified in 2006 to add some additional buildings on the site. However, due to the economic downturn we had at the end of the last decade, the applicant chose to leave their manufacturing facility at the Fifth Street site, and those CUPs expired. So the current use permit application is requesting that approximately 23,000 square feet of the existing 70,000 square foot warehouse building be reconfigured for the manufacture of stucco products. That includes manufacturing inside the building, as well as the erection of some storage tanks outside the building for the storage of materials used to produce stucco products. Just as an aside, staff did inquire with the applicant about the future of the facility on Fifth Street and was told at this time they have no plans to change that. Staff is recommending approval of this project. It's basically the same as what was proposed over a decade ago. The applicant is in the audience should you have any questions for them, and I am happy to answer your questions as well, and that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. We're going to go ahead and open the public hearing. And if commissioners do have questions for staff, I'm going to give first the applicant an opportunity to make any comments if you do wish to do so. If there are no comments, then we can go ahead and just take questions from commissioners for the applicant and staff. And it doesn't look like there's any public comments, so we'll leave it open until commissioners, in case commissioners do have questions for the applicant. So with that, I'll start to my right. Commissioner Austin, any questions on this project? No. Commissioner Leonard.
I do have one for the applicant, if you wouldn't mind stepping up.
Sure, you come up, just please identify yourself and who you represent.
Yes, good evening. My name is Dan Erickson. I'm with Principal Architect with Comstock Johnson Architects.
Okay, my question was relating to the manufacture of stucco products. Is there any fugitive dust that happens as a result that exhausts from the building, or is it all internal, all on the interior?
No, it's all interior. Buzz Winchell is here. He's the operator of the facility as well, but there are, devices and filters put on that material. It's contained within the mixing system, and the mixing happens actually in the building, not outside. There are silos outside for raw material, but those materials come into the building and are, correct me if I'm wrong, Buzz, but are mixed there. So no, there are not, the dust and such is not emitted.
Okay, great, thank you. That was my only question.
Vice Chair Liebig?
Thank you. Definitely supportive of the project. So with that in mind, the question, Ms. Allen alluded to this already. My questions had to be, whether or not this was a transfer of the manufacturing from the Fifth Street property to this new property, or more of an expansion of your business.
Buzz might be able to answer this better than me, but right now, the other facility that was going to happen 10 years ago was actually, there was a new building and a larger facility being proposed. I don't believe that capacity is needed with what the owner is planning to do now. It needs some additional capacity, but isn't looking to take existing capacity offline and replace it in total at the current location of this facility expansion.
Is not planning on doing that? Is that what you?
Well, I'm
sorry.
saying,
I didn't hear it clearly.
yeah, it's an expansion of the existing
Gotcha.
capacity right now, sorry.
Okay. I think that helps answer my other question, because this is an existing building that you have. If you're replacing some of the warehouse space with manufacturing, is there going to be a future effort to replace the loss of your warehouse space? No. Okay. I think that's it. The interest that these questions are mostly related to the Fifth Street building site, which is, it's a legal non-conforming use. But I was wondering whether or not we were looking at the transfer or
Right.
not at this time, so.
Not at this time.
But Buzz, would you like to say a few comments? I know you wouldn't stood up.
To answer your question, I think there's kind of a commingling of the concepts. We are going to keep Fifth Street open until we can get everything up and running at Parkway, and then we are going to empty the facility at Fifth Street entirely. And at that point, we will hopefully either develop it or just sell the property to a developer.
Thank you.
Commissioner Berliner and Commissioner Vu, any questions directed to the applicant before we close the public hearing, and then questions to staff?
I just wanted to ask really quickly, in your statement of justification, it says a second shift may be required until 12 PM. Do you mean 12 AM?
If you could come up to the mic to be able to.
It says in your statement of justification that a second shift may be required until 12 noon. Did you mean 12 AM?
Well, if and when we ever are lucky enough to do that, it would probably run up to approximately 10 PM, 11 PM.
Are there any noise concerns?
Pardon me?
Are there any noise concerns?
For Parkway, I don't think so. No one's there that late,
Okay,
except for the people at the post office.
okay, thank you.
Commissioner Vu? All right. Thank you, Buzz, and thank you, Mr. Erickson, for that. We will close the public hearing. And any questions directed to staff at this time? Commissioner Austin?
Just comments.
Comments or questions to staff?
Yeah, so for me, this is relatively straightforward. I'm supportive of staff recommendation, and I very much appreciate the applicant's clarification. As a little bit of background, particularly for the newer commissioners, we, as you've heard, we went through a general plan update, we've gone through a zoning ordinance, a modernization project, or ZOMP exclamation mark, and through those processes, we do have situations where we have what Commissioner Liebig described as legal nonconforming, which means that businesses are there. We are seeking to change the kind of land use quality of that particular area, and as such, we hope that there's sort of a phasing out of uses that don't match what we're seeking to create in that particular area. This, to me, is exactly the kind of thing that we need to be doing to move legal nonconforming uses into areas that are appropriate, in this case, industrial areas, and free up areas like in a critical location in the Bridge District, adjacent to high-density housing, Rayleigh Field, the barn complex. And so these are the kinds of things that not only am I supportive of, but I want to thank staff and also encourage staff to continue to make support these processes, make it easy. This may not also be a planning department consideration, but also an economic development department consideration as well. So supporting property owners like the applicant to do what they need to do to free up legal non-conforming property so they can become the types of things that we're hoping to see in our city. So thank you for your work. Thank you, applicant.
Thank you, Commissioner Austin. Commissioner Leonard?
Nothing.
All right, Vice Chair Liebig?
Well, once again, I just want to note that Ms. Austin has most eloquently stated what I was hoping to say. But these types of projects are critical for us to move areas like the Bridge District forward to where we want to go. So I'm absolutely in favor of this project.
Thank you. Commissioner Berliner? Commissioner Vu?
I am definitely supportive of this and appreciate you keeping your business in West Sacramento.
I don't have any comments for the applicant or staff. Thank you for the presentation. With that, I will entertain, or is there a motion to approve the project?
Second?
Moved by Commissioner Vu, seconded by Commissioner Berliner. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Motion carries. Thank you.
Any interested party may appeal the decision of the Planning Commission in this matter to the City Council by filing a written appeal with the city clerk within 15 days of tonight's action, and as always, that appeal must be accompanied by the appropriate filing fee.
Thank you, Mr. Tilly. With that, we'll move to General Administration Functions, Part 2, a informal discussion. Any comments, final comments from the commissioners?
I do, Chair.
Okay, Commissioner Austin.
So just as a reminder, particularly for new commissioners, but for all of us really, we are, as planning commissioners, members of the American Planning Association. So I encourage you to check out local events by our local Sacramento Valley section. That website is svsapa.org. That's svsapa.org. Highly encourage you to check in with that. They have great events, and many of which include a speaker series that are held actually across the street at the West Sacramento Community Center. The other thing I want to note around the American Planning Association is that there is a national conference in San Francisco in April. I am unable to attend, unfortunately, but it's a great opportunity to learn more about planning in general. Typically, there are, at least for the California chapter gatherings, usually a breakfast for planning commissioners, so you could meet planning commissioners from around the state or the country. There's also going to be a California chapter in Santa Barbara this fall. That's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Austin. Vice Chair Liebig.
Thank you, Ms. Austin. And if anyone can't find that website, I am also the APA Sac Valley Section Board. I'm on the board as the Planning Commissioner representative for the region, so you can always ask me. And in addition, I'd like to add, for the national conference in San Francisco, the Sac Valley Section will be offering a scholarship, as well as to the Santa Barbara one. So I believe it might be limited to new planners. I don't quite have that memorized. I had a couple questions. Sorry, David, I missed a couple things earlier. There's a scooter launch coming up, and I thought I heard that it was at nighttime, but they're offering waffles.
The mayor mentioned that tomorrow at the barn, they will be I just learned that as well, that there is a scooter launch with waffles and helmets. So, and I believe that both the helmets and waffles are free. So
the question is, should I be arriving there around 6 a.m. or 6 p.m.?
5 to 8 p.m. he said.
5 to 8
Yes, it
p.m.
was in the late afternoon into the early evening, but scooters will be here tomorrow.
Great,
Waffles
so
maybe with
they're
chicken?
dinner waffles. All right. Dessert waffles. So, and the other one is the League of Cities, actually, I've got two more. Planning Commissioner Academy, put on by the League of Cities. When was that one, David? I think you said it was next month. March 6th, 9th?
March 6th to the 8th at the Queen Mary, which actually would be kind of cool.
Okay. I missed this last year, but this year we will be doing a planning commissioner training. Again, it's the APA Sac Valley section. We will be doing a planning commissioner training. We're trying to do it right across the street at the community center. Again, this is a regional thing. It just happens to be right in our front yard, typically. So, and thank you for the city for continuing to host events like this. We're targeting end of March, beginning of April for this one.
If you could keep us updated on that. that'd be
Absolutely.
great. Awesome. Any other updates or comments?
That's it. Thank you.
All right, formal discussion on my left. Commissioner Brenner, Commissioner Vu? No? All right, with that, we will adjourn the meeting.